So I wanted to ask you a personal question.
Okay, shoot.
When was a moment in comics where you thought that you didn't know if you would continue in comics, or if you didn't know you were going to make it, or you didn't know if you could, survive?
Oh, there have been a few moments, but I think the biggest one for me, and it actually leads right back into comics in a way, or actually right back into a very direct way, was around 1999, the tail end of 1999. I had what I call my almost year, where I was almost the artist on Justice League. I was almost the artist on Green Lantern. I was almost the artist on a Creature Commandos miniseries, and I always fell short for some reason. Like it just wasn't happening. I was working a little bit. I was doing a lot of indie stuff where I was like either doing design work or I was inking, another. I was inking this book that I'm still not completely sure what it's about, but and then I was doing stuff for Scholastic for like Classics Illustrated, that sort of thing. But I decided, my first plan was I was just going to do samples. And I did that for a couple of months, actually, where I was just doing samples every week and sending them out to every editor. And whatever editors were giving me feedback, I tried to incorporate that into the next set of samples, and it just became like this really expensive, constant deluge. Because these are the days when you still had to send stuff in through the mail. Yeah. So what ended up happening was I was seeing this girl at the same time, but it wasn't working out, and I was feeling really down about being in New York, and that my comic book career wasn't going the way that I wanted it to, and everything just seemed to suck. Yeah. And I was in Barnes & Noble, and I picked up a copy of Animation Magazine, and I flipped through to the want ads, and I saw an ad in the back for Sony, and they were looking for storyboard artists. So I contacted them, and they sent me out a test for Starship Troopers. So I did the test, mailed it back, got a call from them saying that they had a job for me, but I had to be in Los Angeles in a week. So I'm broke, and I dragged together $300 when you could fly to LA for $300 on a one-way ticket.
Wow.
Stayed at a friend's house for like the first couple of weeks. It was supposed to be a 6-week job originally. 2 weeks into the job, they offered me a permanent position, or what was supposed to be a permanent position. Or actually, what had happened was the HR guy came to my cubicle and says, "So, you're not planning on going back to New York anytime soon, are you?" It's like, no, why? It's like, you might want to hang around for a bit. So
you're like, all right, I got work. I'm
it's like I got an apartment, I bought a car, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to make the transition into animation, into doing storyboards, because there were a lot of ex-comic book people who were working at Sony doing storyboards and doing, layout. And they seemed to be happy, and, although after a while, you started to realize that they were really, really jonesing to jump back into doing comics full time, because it's an addiction. It really is.
It's a passion.
Yeah,
for everyone who's in it, you do it because you love it.
Absolutely. So I'm at Sony, and I'm there for about 4 months, and I get a phone call. This is beginning early 2000. So I get a phone call, and it's from my then agent. And I'm just like, "Hey, Dave, what's going on?" It's like, "Well, I got a call from Marvel, and they're looking for an artist for New Warriors." It's like, "Really?" "I don't know. I'm kind of doing this animation thing." It's like, "No, give them a call, see what they want." So I call Bobby Chase, who is the editor of New Warriors at the time, and Iron Man, and they were all out of office. And I called her up, and I was like, "Hi, Bobby, this is Jamal Igle. How's it going?" She's like, "Well, I don't have an artist for New Warriors yet." I was like, "Okay, well, can I think about it? Give me 2 days, and let me." So I thought about it for about 2 days, and I agreed to take the book. And I took the book, and I turned in my notice at Sony, because there's no way that you could, you know, work
Yeah.
8 to 12 hours doing storyboards
and then switch over
and do comics, especially not monthly comics. So I left the job at Sony, and then found out later that Sony Animation had laid off 2/3 of their storyboarding staff.
Wow.
So I got out. What had happened was the Men in Black series had just wrapped up. They just wrapped up its 3rd season. Fox had canceled Godzilla and Big Boy and Rusty at the same time. So all of those shows were
just
cut.
getting canned.
So the only things that were left were they were doing Harold and the Purple Crayon and this other Dragon Tales. I don't know if anybody remember. Yeah,
I don't even remember it.
Yeah, it was just these 2 little kids. It was just a show about this brother and a sister who wished on a dragon scale and went to this magical land with friendly dragons. It was a very cute show. But, suddenly you had all these guys who had been doing action shows, who had come over from like Warner Brothers and all these other studios, and been working at Sony, and they were all out of work suddenly. So they all went back to the studios where they were working before. And I ended up working for Marvel for almost a year I did New Warriors for 4 issues, and that was interesting because it got canceled just as I was turning my first pages in.
No.
Well, they said that it had nothing to do with me, that they loved what I was doing, but
it's not a good feeling whenever you're like,
No.
hey, we're back in comics, and then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, you have to find another project because this one's done.
Well, they had something for me right after ended up doing an Iron Fist Wolverine miniseries with Jay Ferber, who was the writer on New Warriors. But that was, so that was my last Marvel work for a while, and then I ended up working at a movie theater part-time to try and bring some money in while I was trying to make the jump back into doing animation. But like I said, everybody had worked at Sony and all these other studios. There was like this culling basically of domestic animation, and this was 2000, to the beginning of 2001 when they started really like bringing in translating Japanese shows. And so you had like Yu-Gi-Oh coming in and all these other shows. So so what ended up happening was, after a while, like I wasn't getting any traction, couldn't find any work. I'm working part-time at this movie theater. It's just I'm eating popcorn to sustain myself, so I'm not
Hostess cupcakes, whatever it takes.
Yeah, it's like there was a Japanese hibachi place that had like a $5 dinner.
Yeah.
And that was like, that seemed expensive at that point. So I was just like, you know what, screw this. I can't do this anymore. I'm going back to New York. So I packed all of my things I could fit in my car, and I started driving back. And 3 days into my trip, I rear-ended a semi.
Oh.
I got caught in a snowstorm in New Mexico, in northern New Mexico.
Icy
I rear-ended a semi. I totaled my car. I ended up being stuck in Moriarty, New Mexico for 3 days while I was talking to the insurance company. And they basically said, well, you owe about $2,000 on the car, and there's about $5,000 worth of damage, and we're just going to write it off. Congratulations, you now own a car, free and clear. I was like, oh, thanks. So I had to trade the wreck and whatever I couldn't carry with me, personal possessions. But I had 6 bags that I threw on a Greyhound bus and came back to New York.
Wow.
With. So when I got back to New York, luckily I had a job waiting for me. A friend of mine had hooked me up with a law firm because I've studied a little bit of contract law and copyright law, but they were looking for a receptionist, so I was a receptionist.
Do whatever you have to do.
Yeah, I was a receptionist at this law firm, and but while I was working at the law firm, I only had to work at the law firm 2 days a week, and it was this semi-retired lawyer who he was an estates attorney, and he was semi-retired. He only came in 2 days a week. He was old school. He must have been like 83, 84 years old. And Harvey Kate was his name. This is a character, total character. And he still used a dictaphone. He's
I don't even know what a dictaphone is.
It's a little tape recorder.
Okay.
And
Okay, like the thing you're talking to, like a private eye
Yeah,
kind of thing?
exactly. And he would hand me. I would have to write up all the memos and all of his correspondence based on this dictaphone. But he had never had a male receptionist. So he kept calling me sweetheart and honey.
And he's 80, so you got to give him kind of a break.
Yeah, exactly. You give him a pass. It's like Jamal should. Oh no, sorry. And he'd always start off the same way. It's like, how now, brown cow? How now, brown cow? Testing 1, 2, 3. So I did that for a couple of months, and while I was doing that, I was going over to Marvel in DC and showing my portfolio. And after a while, I started getting fill-in jobs, and that it just started building from there. So that's my roundabout way of how I crawled my way back into doing comics full time.